The heat of the New Mexico afternoon pressed against my back as I stepped into my study, expecting nothing more than the familiar quiet of a retired man's home. My fingers reached automatically for the light switch, but halfway through the motion, I froze. Something in the room felt wrong. Not dramatically wrong. No broken windows, no forced entry, no overturned shelves, but wrong in a way only a man who has lived 40 years in one place can recognize. I closed the door softly behind me and let my eyes adjust. The room looked ordinary, but the ordinary was precisely what bothered me. On my desk, a stack of case files I kept for reference sat slightly askew, the top folder turned 2 inches to the left. I never left it that way. My leather chair was angled toward the door instead of the window, and on the metal edge of my filing cabinet, faint scratches glinted under the soft light. Someone had been here. I walked slowly, as if the air itself might shatter. At 68 years old, I no longer moved like the federal prosecutor I once was, but old instincts still lived in my bones. Instincts that whispered danger long before logic could explain it. I touched the cabinet, tracing the marks with my thumb. Not deep enough to be made by a knife, too narrow for a screwdriver, likely something improvised, maybe a letter opener or a thin metal key. Amateurs always used the wrong tools. I inhaled, exhaled, then pulled the drawer open. The files were all present, but they were not in my order. I knew my order. I had alphabetized these folders myself every January for the last decade. The updated will that should have been at the front was tucked behind insurance papers. Property records from the ranch outside Taos were reversed. One envelope bore a faint smudge I didn't recognize. I lifted it to my nose, floral perfume, not mine. My pulse tightened. For a long moment, I stood with both hands braced on the cabinet, my head bowed. I wanted to dismiss it, wanted to believe maybe I had misplaced things myself, maybe I had forgotten. But prosecutors do not survive long by embracing convenient explanations. Memory fades with age, yes, but instinct does not. Evidence does not. And the evidence said someone had broken into the most private corner of my home. By the time I walked out of the study, the sun was sinking, casting long amber streaks across the living room. The smell of roasted chicken drifted from the kitchen. Marina and Cliff had insisted on cooking for me that evening, claiming they wanted family time. That phrase used to warm me. Now, it only tightened something inside my chest. I took my usual seat at the table. Marina placed a plate in front of me, her smile warm but her eyes unfocused, as if her mind were elsewhere. Cliff settled across from her, clearing his throat before cutting into dinner. We talked about weather, about tourists in Santa Fe, about my upcoming medical checkup. Nothing unusual, nothing alarming. Until the conversation shifted. "Dad," Marina said suddenly, her fork hovering in midair. "Have you reviewed your will recently?" I set down my knife. Slowly, deliberately. "My will? Why?" "Just routine." Cliff jumped in too quickly. "For someone your age, it's smart to make sure everything is in order." "Someone your age?" The words echoed in my skull. I studied their faces, years of courtroom experience replaying automatically. Marina's jaw was tight. Cliff avoided eye contact. Their smiles were too stiff, too eager. Something moved between them in quick glances. An unspoken language I recognized from witnesses coaching each other on the stand. "What are you two really asking?" I asked. Marina laughed lightly. "Dad, come on. We just worry about you. Big house, lots of paperwork, memory slipping." "My memory is fine." Her smile faltered. After dinner, I turned on the local news, pretending to watch. In reality, I observed their reflections in the living room window. The two of them sat close together on the couch, whispering in nervous tones. Marina pressed her palm to Cliff's knee, as if reassuring him. His shoulders slumped with tension. They were planning something. Planning around me. Planning for a future that apparently did not include me. Later, when I lay awake staring at the dark ceiling, the truth finally crystallized. My daughter, my only child, the girl whose lunchbox I packed every morning and whose scraped knees I bandaged, was plotting behind my back. And Cliff, whom I had welcomed into my home like a son, was whispering alongside her. My hands clenched to the blanket. Something was unfolding in my house. and I was going to uncover every piece of it. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. Though I had barely slept, the desert sky outside my bedroom window shifted from deep indigo to a thin line of gold stretching across the horizon. I sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing my temples, replaying Marina's voice from the night before. For someone your age, people use that phrase when they are preparing to move around you, not with you. By 7, Marina was already in the kitchen, humming as she made coffee. Cliff sat at the table scrolling on his phone, but the moment he saw me enter, he locked the screen as if caught. "Morning, Dad," Marina chirped, too brightly. "Did you sleep well?" I lied. "Better than usual." Cliff cleared his throat. "Marina and I were talking. Maybe you should take that road trip you always wanted. Colorado Springs or something. Fresh air might help your mood." My mood. I watched the two of them standing shoulder to shoulder, speaking gently, carefully, like handlers guiding a fragile animal. My decision formed instantly. They wanted me gone. So I would give them exactly what they wanted, just not in the way they imagined. I stirred sugar into my coffee, letting my hand tremble slightly. A deliberate performance. "Maybe you're right," I said softly. "Maybe a trip would be good for me." They exchanged a hidden look, one that ignited the final spark of certainty deep inside me. They had a plan, and my absence was part of it. Before noon, I pulled out travel brochures I hadn't touched in years. Maps, old hiking guides, a dusty camera bag. Marina watched from the doorway with barely contained satisfaction. "You're really going?" she asked. "Yes. Maybe 2 weeks. Maybe more. No responsibilities out there. Just quiet." Cliff clapped me on the back. "That's great, Jonathan. You deserve a break." Their excitement slipped through their politeness like cracks in a dam. They hovered around me all afternoon, offering to help pack, offering to check my car, offering to plan my route, not out of care, out of need. They wanted confirmation, proof that I would be out of the way. That evening, I sat at my dining table, studying my hiking maps under warm lamplight. Marina and Cliff leaned in behind me, nodding at every destination I traced. Their eyes were not on the map. They were on the timeline. When I would leave, when they would be free to move. It was almost insulting how easily they revealed themselves. The next morning, I set my plan in motion. I loaded my SUV with clothes, boots, binoculars, blankets, and an old camping chair. All of it visible, all of it a performance. Beneath the camping gear, tucked deep into a duffel bag, I packed my real tools: a digital recorder, spare batteries, night vision binoculars, and the legal pad I used for case notes during my career. Tools for watching, not wandering. By mid-morning, Marina and Cliff stood on the front porch waving, their faces contorted into exaggerated warmth. "Drive safe, Dad. Call us if you need anything." I smiled and waved back, but as soon as I reached the end of the street, I glanced into the rearview mirror. They dropped their arms at the exact same moment. They turned toward each other. Cliff said something. Marina laughed softly. Their joy at my departure was clearer than the desert sky. I drove 15 minutes north, then doubled back using side roads known only to locals. I parked at a rundown lodge off a quiet service road. No cameras, no questions. The clerk barely looked up as I signed the register under the name Daniel Holt. The room was dim and smelled faintly of old carpet, but it served its purpose. I left the lights off, sat on the bed, and waited until the sun dropped behind the mountains. At 9:30, darkness thickened over the neighborhood. I drove to the edge of my old street, parking 3 blocks away beneath a dying cottonwood tree. My legs ached as I walked in the shadows, but I pushed through it. There was no turning back now. The vacant adobe house across from mine stood silent and dark. I approached the lockbox by the door, the realtor code already memorized from a sign I had seen weeks earlier. 4 digits. A click. The lockbox dropped open. Inside, the key waited. The front door creaked softly as I entered. Dust floated in the sliver of moonlight cutting across the floor. The house smelled of abandonment, of emptiness waiting to be filled. Perfect. I moved room to room without switching on a single light. My senses sharpened into the same heightened state I used to enter before major prosecutions. My mind catalogued everything, every angle, every window. The front bedroom provided a clear view directly into my living room across the street. I set up the camping chair. I raised the binoculars. Lights were on in my house. All of them. Living room, kitchen, upstairs, hallway, as if someone wanted complete visibility throughout the place. Then, through the window, I saw movement. Cliff. He paced the living room like a man preparing for something monumental. Marina sat on the couch with her phone pressed to her ear, speaking rapidly, her free hand slicing the air in frustration. They weren't waiting for me to leave. They were already beginning. In that moment, sitting in a dusty, abandoned house, in the middle of the night, watching my own home like a stranger, I understood the truth. My daughter wasn't simply drifting away from me. She was orchestrating something far darker. And from here on, I would see every step of it. The next morning, the sun rose over the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, casting long amber light across my silent stakeout. I had barely slept. Every sound from the house across the street pulled my eyes back to the binoculars. Every shadow made my pulse spike. Hours passed with slow, deliberate patience until finally, around 10, something unexpected happened. Footsteps. Soft, careful, inside the vacant house. I stood slowly, gripping the edge of the windowsill. I was not armed. I had only a flashlight and the steel tension of old instincts. My breath slowed. I moved down the hallway toward the sound, each step silent despite the ache in my knees. A silhouette appeared by the kitchen doorway, small, hesitant, elderly. Then she stepped fully into view. Selina McBride, my neighbor of nearly 20 years. White hair pulled into a tidy twist. A pale blue cardigan despite the heat. Her eyes met mine without fear. "Jonathan Pierce," she said calmly. "I thought I would find you here." I nearly collapsed from relief and confusion. "Selina, what are you doing?" She stepped into the light, closing the door behind her, as if she owned the place. "I heard you leave," she said matter-of-factly. "But I have also noticed things at your house that do not match your absence." I stared at her, genuinely stunned. "You knew I was watching?" She nodded, as if it were obvious. "I have lived across from you for a long time. I know when something is wrong. And something has been wrong in your home for weeks." She pulled a small spiral notebook from her cardigan pocket and held it out. Inside, written in elegant cursive, was a chronicle of dates, times, descriptions, cars arriving late at night, unknown individuals entering with folders, lights switching on and off at odd hours, even specific clothing descriptions, a precision that rivaled my own. "You kept records?" I whispered. "Someone had to," she said simply. "When you live long enough, you learn to trust patterns more than excuses. And the patterns at your house have been troubling." I sank into a dusty counterstool. "Selina, why didn't you tell me before?" Her eyes softened, but her voice held a quiet power. "Because I wasn't sure if you already knew. And because once, years ago, my own daughter stole from me in ways I refused to see until it was too late. I promised myself I would never let silence help a thief again." Something in my chest tightened. Not just grief. Recognition, betrayal, had a familiar tone. The same in every story, every courtroom, every family. Selina stepped to the window beside me, peering through the dusty glass. "They moved around your home last night," she murmured, "like people who believe they own the place. Something is building. Something they have planned. And soon." I swallowed hard. "Do you know when?" "Midnight," she whispered. "Midnight is when secrets tend to unfold." We sat together in the vacant house that smelled of dust and forgotten memories. Selina quietly unpacked a canvas tote she brought with her. Inside was a thermos, 2 cups, a pair of old binoculars, and sandwiches wrapped in wax paper. I stared at her in disbelief. "You came prepared." Her mouth curved into a thin smile. "I always come prepared when danger threatens what is mine, and I believe danger threatens what is yours." We ate in silence, watching the house across the street as the day dragged forward. My living room, bright with light. The upstairs hallway flickering occasionally with shadows. Marina pacing. Cliff retrieving boxes from the garage. Small, ominous movements accumulating like storm clouds. Around 7 in the evening, As the desert sky shifted to bruised purple, Selena leaned closer. "They are getting comfortable," she murmured. "People who grow comfortable make mistakes." Her tone was oddly reassuring, like a woman who had watched enough human nature to understand its rhythms better than most. Night descended fully. Streetlights flickered on. The neighborhood settled into a hush that felt almost sacred. In that heavy quiet, I realized I was no longer alone. I had an unexpected ally. At 11:40, Selena touched my arm. "It's close." My breath lodged in my throat. Her certainty carried the weight of experience. We leaned forward, staring into the darkness, waiting for the moment she had predicted. And at exactly 11:47 p.m., headlights glided silently down the street. Selena whispered, "You were right to trust your instincts. Everything you feared is about to reveal itself." The black SUV slowed as it approached my driveway, its headlights sweeping across the asphalt like a silent warning. It rolled to a stop without a sound engine, cutting with a soft mechanical click that carried through the quiet street. Selena and I remained still in the darkness of the vacant house, our breaths shallow, our eyes unblinking. "There," she whispered, not taking her gaze from the window. "That is the man I have seen before." The driver stepped out, tall, sharply dressed despite the late hour. He carried a slim leather briefcase and moved with the brisk confidence of someone accustomed to confidential dealings. He paused, checking the house numbers, then glanced over his shoulder with the quiet caution of a man who knew he should not be here. My front door opened before he reached it. Marina appeared in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the warm glow inside. She spoke in low, hurried tones, ushering him in. Cliff joined them moments later, stiff and nervous. The door closed. All three disappeared from view. I lifted my binoculars, adjusting them with practiced precision. Through the living room window, I could see them clearly now. The stranger set his briefcase on my dining table. Marina placed a stack of documents beside him, documents I recognized instantly. My private files, my property records, my signature sheets. Selena whispered, "That is the man I saw last week. He was carrying papers then, too." The stranger opened the folder and pulled out a document. Even from across the street, through glass and distance, I recognized the page, the layout, the text, the signature line at the bottom. A power of attorney. My heart didn't race. It hardened. I focused the lens until the page sharpened. The signature at the bottom looked like mine, almost, nearly identical. But after decades examining forged documents in court, I knew where to look. The loop of the J in Jonathan was wrong. Mine always curved upward. This one fell straight. My hands clenched. Cliff leaned in over the table, pointing to the signature, speaking rapidly. Marina nodded, too eagerly. It looked like rehearsed insistence. The stranger remained expressionless, flipping through page after page. Then something happened that twisted my gut. He held up an envelope, cream-colored, heavy paper, my attorney's letterhead. Inside that envelope was a medical assessment claiming cognitive decline. They had forged my mind as well as my signature. My pulse hammered so loudly I feared Selena would hear it. Her hand found my forearm, steady and firm. "Stay focused," she whispered. "Look at what they are doing, not what it means." I took a breath and forced myself back into the moment. The stranger spoke, his lips moved sharply, decisively. Marina retrieved a pen and signed something with a flourish. Cliff followed, his hand trembling. Then the stranger signed. He slid contracts toward them, pointing to lines they needed to initial. The paperwork formed a small mountain on my dining table. Contracts, agreements, disclosures, transfer forms, more than enough to steal a life. Selena recorded timestamps in her notebook with flawless precision. 12:11 a.m., 12:17 a.m., 12:23 a.m. Every minute mattered. The stranger then removed a blue folder from his briefcase. He opened it slowly, revealing a real estate contract. I could see the large black numbers printed across the page. Joshabawan Wuchenmeyuan. Nearly $1 million. The stranger tapped the figure. Marina smiled. Cliff exhaled in relief. They clinked glasses of champagne that Marina brought from the kitchen, toasting, celebrating, drinking under my roof. They were selling my house in secret. They were preparing to remove me from my own life. My jaw tightened until it ached. "They think you are gone," Selina murmured. "They think they have won." "Not yet," I whispered back. "Not yet." The stranger stood, gathering the signed papers into his briefcase. Marina and Cliff walked him to the door. As they stepped outside, the porch light illuminated their faces. Tension melted into triumph. They shook hands with the practiced ease of conspirators who believed their plan was flawless. The stranger returned to his SUV and drove off into the silent night. The moment his taillights disappeared, Marina leaned into Cliff, laughing softly. He wrapped an arm around her waist, pulling her close, whispering something into her hair. Their silhouettes through the window were intimate, victorious, untouchable. Selina scribbled another note. "They think their future is secured. That man will return soon with more documents," she said quietly. I stared at my house, my home, watching two people I had loved betray me piece by piece. No, not betray me. Erase me. I lowered the binoculars, my hands trembling not with fear but with rising resolve. "This ends," I whispered, "tomorrow night." Selina closed her notebook. "Good, because they have planned their midnight. And now, Jonathan, you must plan yours." Morning crept over the neighborhood slowly, as if hesitant to shine light on what had happened the night before. I had not left the vacant house. Selina had insisted on staying until dawn, but around 4 she excused herself, saying she needed to prepare for whatever comes next. I knew better than to question her. She had already proven she understood far more than she let on. After she left, I sat in the dusty silence, replaying every moment of the midnight meeting. The forged signature, the fabricated medical assessment, the contract for nearly $1 million, the champagne toast in my dining room, and Marina's laughter, light, familiar, but now sharp as broken glass. By 8, I decided it was time. I left the vacant house, keeping to the shade, and walked the long way around until I reached the side street leading to my backyard. I waited behind a mesquite tree until Marina and Cliff pulled out of the driveway. Cliff drove toward his construction site job. Marina headed in the opposite direction, dressed in work clothes and sunglasses, likely on her way to her interior design firm downtown. Perfect. I counted 2 full minutes after their cars vanished before approaching the back door of my own house. My hand trembled slightly as I inserted the key. I half expected alarms, half expected Marina to appear behind me. But the house greeted me with nothing but the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the familiar scent of cedar. My home. Or rather, the place they were trying to claim as theirs. I walked through the kitchen, every sense alert. The study still bore the faint damage on the filing cabinet. My heart tightened again, but I kept moving, heading straight for the guest room, Cliff's temporary office. Inside, the desk was a mess of receipts, pens, and coffee rings, but the bottom drawer, that drawer, had caught my attention through the window last night. Cliff had pulled something from it repeatedly. I knelt, opened it slowly, and there it was. A red folder, thick, stuffed with papers. Familiar? I set it on the desk and opened it. There were documents I instantly recognized. My original will, old bank statements, medical history printouts. But beneath those lay the true poison, the forged power of attorney. The signature looked like mine, nearly perfect, but the ink had bled slightly into the paper, too new for the date listed, and the formation of the P in Pierce was wrong. I had never in my life written it that way. I photographed every angle of the page with my phone. Beneath that were multiple versions of the same medical report, each one slightly edited, dated, and reprinted. The one used last night declared early cognitive deterioration. Another said mild impairment. A third said memory inconsistency observed. It was a menu of lies. My stomach twisted as I lifted the next sheet, an email printout. To Martin Corwell, Seattle. Subject: after we close. Marina's words spilled across the page, each line worse than the one before. Once the sale finalizes, I'll have the funds to join you. Cliff thinks we're buying land here. He has no idea what's coming. I sat back in the chair, stunned. The betrayal inside the betrayal. Marina wasn't just stealing from me. She was discarding Cliff the moment the money hit their account. Cliff believed he was part of a team. Marina believed he was an obstacle. I kept reading. I'll transfer half immediately. Enough for us to start over without anyone else in the way. Anyone else. My chest tightened painfully. My own daughter had written those words with ease. I continued photographing everything. The emails, the drafts, the medical forgeries, the real estate contract, with its nearly $1 million price tag. Then I found the page that made my breath stop entirely. A handwritten list in Marina's soft cursive. Selling the house. Cash transfer. Closing date confirmed. Leave Cliff. Move to Seattle. Cut ties. Cut ties. Not with Cliff. With me? I swallowed the weight of the moment and placed every document back exactly where I had found it. Same order, same angle, same drawer position. Not a single clue to suggest I had been there. I walked back through the house slowly, letting my fingers brush along the wall of framed photographs, birthdays, fishing trips, holidays, memories that now felt like strangers posing in borrowed moments. At the door, I paused and whispered into the stillness. If Marina wanted to erase me, she should have chosen someone easier to erase. I stepped into the bright New Mexico sun, my evidence secured, my purpose sharpened. They had created their plan. Now I would create mine. Back at the lodge, I spread the photos across the thin motel blanket like pieces of a criminal puzzle. For decades, I had presented evidence to juries, guided agents through investigations, and dismantled falsehoods with methodical precision. What lay before me now was no different. The difference was only in the names on the documents, and the bloodline behind the betrayal. I turned on the lamp and sat at the small wooden desk, opening my laptop. Time to move. Time to anchor my case in law before Marina and Cliff advanced their next step. There was no room left for hesitation. By 10 that morning, I was dressed in a crisp shirt and slacks, the closest thing to courtroom attire I could manage in that cramped room. I placed the forged documents, photographs, and recordings in a neat folder, then slid it into my leather briefcase. The same briefcase I carried through countless federal trials. Its weight steadied me. First stop, the notary office. The building sat tucked between a dental clinic and a dusty art supply shop. Inside, the air smelled of paper and toner. The notary, a woman named Evelyn, looked up in recognition. "Mr. Pierce, I thought you moved this week." I offered a thin smile. "Not yet. I'm here to file a sworn statement." I slid the prepared affidavit toward her. It stated, clearly and decisively, that I had never executed any power of attorney, nor authorized anyone to act on my behalf regarding property, assets, or medical decisions. It also documented that my signature had been forged. Evelyn scanned the page, her eyebrows lifting slightly, but she asked no questions. She stamped the document with a firm press of her notary seal. The sharp thud of the stamp felt like a quiet declaration. One foundation block set. Next, I drove across town to the Desert Vista Credit Union, where my primary accounts were held. The manager, a man named Alan Ross, met me in his glass-walled office. "How can I help you, Mr. Pierce?" I spoke calmly, each word shaped like evidence in a hearing. "I need a hold placed on all real estate-related withdrawals or transfers connected to my accounts, effective immediately." His polite expression shifted. "Is something wrong?" "There has been an attempt to move funds without authorization. I'm preventing further attempts." He typed rapidly on his keyboard. I watched the reflection of the screen on his glasses. He paused. "Hold applied. Nothing moves without your in-person approval and verification." "Good." I took the printed confirmation from him, thanked him, and left. Another wall strengthened. But the most important barrier still needed to be built. I drove next to a quiet office complex on the north side of the city. The sign on the suite door read, "Marston Legal Group, Estate and Asset Protection." Inside, the receptionist led me to an office where a woman in a navy suit rose to shake my hand. "I'm Attorney Claire Marston. What can I do for you today?" I took a slow breath. "I want to establish an irrevocable living trust, effective with a retroactive date. I need my home, accounts, and property moved into the trust immediately." She blinked once. "Irrevocable? That is a significant step. I know what it means." Something in my tone convinced her not to press. She opened her laptop. Let's begin then. For the next 2 hours, we reviewed details with steady precision. She explained implications. I confirmed them. She asked if this was to prevent elder exploitation. I answered truthfully, yes. She didn't ask by whom. By mid-afternoon, she handed me a thick stack of documents. Sign here, here, and here. I signed everything. Claire notarized it herself. Then she uploaded the filings to the county recorder. As of this moment, she said, your home belongs to the trust, and only you, as trustee, have authority over it. The relief that washed over me wasn't comfort. It was readiness. One final step, back at the motel, as dusk settled into the sky, I transformed the room into a command center. Papers arranged exactly like trial exhibits. Evidence grouped into categories. Forged documents, emails, time-stamped photos, recordings, Selena's notes. 5 folders, 5 silent weapons. When the time came to walk into that closing room, I would not be the confused old man Marina imagined. I would be the prosecutor they had forgotten I once was. And this time, the defendants would be my own daughter and the man she married. 3 days remained until the closing. 3 days until Marina and Cliff would walk into an office, believing their victory was inevitable. 3 days until their world snapped under the weight of the truth they built with their own hands. My task was simple now. Let them believe I was falling apart. On the morning of July 17th, I drove home slowly, deliberately parking crooked in the driveway. When I walked through the door, Marina rushed toward me with exaggerated concern. Dad, she said, placing a hand on my arm. You're home early. Are you feeling all right? I let my gaze drift, unfocused. I even blinked twice, as though trying to place her face. I thought today was Thursday, I murmured. Cliff stepped forward, eyes narrowing with thinly masked satisfaction. Today is Monday, Jonathan. Are you sure you're keeping track? I lowered my head. I don't know anymore. Marina shot a triumphant look at her husband, subtle but sharp, the kind people share when a plan is working perfectly. Excellent, I thought. Let them walk right into the trap. For the next 2 days, I played my role with meticulous precision. I paused during conversations, asked them to repeat things I already knew, pretended I misplaced my reading glasses, deliberately called Cliff by my late brother's name. Every performance was recorded discreetly on the app, running silently in my pocket. Their reactions revealed more than they realized. Cliff whispered to Marina late at night. Unaware, I stood in the hallway. He's slipping faster than we expected, he said. The closing will be simple. Marina replied. Then we hand the documents over at the appointment. He signs whatever they ask, and it's done. He signs. The irony nearly made me laugh. The night before the closing, I placed my leather briefcase on the motel bed and reviewed everything one final time. The forged documents, the signature comparisons, the time-stamped photos, the audio recordings of Marina telling Cliff that they would use his decline for legal protection. Every piece of evidence was flawless. On the morning of July 18th, I dressed slowly, sliding into my navy suit, the one I wore during my last federal trial. It still fit. My tie still knotted neatly. My shoulders still squared with the resolve of a man who had spent a lifetime seeking truth inside courtrooms. At precisely 1:30, Attorney Claire Marston picked me up at the lodge. The drive to the closing office felt timeless and sharp, like the long walk to the witness stand. She glanced at the briefcase resting on my knees. Are you ready, Mr. Pierce? More than ready. When we stepped off the elevator, onto the second floor of the Sunland title office, I saw them through the glass walls before they saw me. Marina, perfectly dressed, hair curled, a soft smile lifted with anticipation of the life she believed awaited her in Seattle. Cliff, nervous but excited, tapping a pen on the table. The buyer, a man named Victor Malone, sat patiently, going through the contract pages with the closer. He looked pleased. Why wouldn't he be? He was minutes away from purchasing property at a price too clean to question. Then Marina looked up. Her smile died instantly. Cliff followed her gaze and went pale. Jonathan? Marina stammered. What are you doing here? I walked into the room with Claire at my side. The room chilled instantly. I took my seat at the far end of the table, set my briefcase down, and spoke with the same calm authority I once used to swear in witnesses. Good afternoon. I am the actual owner of the property you are attempting to sell. The closer blinked. The buyer frowned. Cliff swallowed. Marina forced a laugh. Dad, you must be confused. We already handled your paperwork. I opened my briefcase and laid out the first folder. This is my notarized affidavit stating I never signed any power of attorney. The closer picked it up. Her eyes widened. I laid out the second folder. The irrevocable trust established weeks before their forged documents date. Claire spoke firmly. Legally, this property cannot be transferred by anyone except Mr. Pierce. I opened the third folder. Surveillance photos. Marina handing documents to the stranger at midnight. Cliff signing pages inside my home. The forgery side by side with my genuine signature. The closer covered her mouth. The buyer stood abruptly. I was told this was clean. Then I played the recording. Marina's voice filled the room. If he challenges anything, we just blame memory loss. He won't remember signing. Silence exploded into pandemonium. Cliff tried to speak stammering excuses that dissolved into fragments. Marina's hands shook violently. The buyer stormed out. The closer declared the transaction canceled on grounds of fraud. Claire closed her folder. That will be all. I stood. They looked at me, terrified. I said only this. You hoped I wouldn't remember, but I remembered everything. The ride to the police station was strangely quiet. Claire drove while I sat in the passenger seat with my briefcase resting on my knees. The adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation at Sunland Title finally began to ebb, leaving behind a hollow ache. Not regret, not guilt, just the undeniable weight of reality. I had prosecuted strangers by the dozens, but nothing prepared me for prosecuting my own daughter. At the station, Detective Raul Mendoza met us in a small interview room. A thick glass window overlooked the hallway, and the walls hummed with the faint whir of air conditioning. Mr. Pierce, he began, I reviewed your email. You said you have evidence of attempted fraud? I placed my briefcase on the table and opened it. The sound of metal clasps snapping apart echoed like a verdict. Yes, Detective. More than evidence. I have the entire scheme. Claire slid folders across the table one by one. Mendoza put on latex gloves before flipping through them, his eyes widening as he read. Forged signatures, false medical statements, midnight meetings with unauthorized agents, a fraudulent real estate contract. Audio recordings clearly capturing Marina and Cliff discussing how to use my supposed decline as a shield. Detective Mendoza raised his head slowly. This is a felony case, he said. Multiple charges, attempted theft of property, forgery, elder exploitation. I nodded once. Do what the law requires. He hesitated. Your daughter will be included in this, sir. I met his eyes. Steady. She included herself. Within 2 hours, officers visited my home. Marina and Cliff were taken separately for questioning. They didn't expect it. They didn't prepare defenses. Their alliance cracked the moment consequences entered the room. Cliff confessed first. He broke easily, spilling everything: how Marina brought him into the plan, how she convinced him I wouldn't notice, how she coached him to talk about my confusion, how she assured him I would forget everything. But Marina did not confess. Not at first. She blamed Cliff, blamed stress, blamed concern for my health, blamed anything that didn't include her own name. Until Detective Mendoza placed her printed emails in front of her, the ones she sent to that man in Seattle. I'll transfer half immediately, enough for us to start over. I imagined the silence after she read her own words. Silence often exposes truth more effectively than shouting ever could. By the end of the day, both were formally charged. My house became mine again. A week later, a judge signed an emergency order removing Marina and Cliff from the property. They were given 3 days to move out. I remained in the motel until the eviction was completed. On the morning they hauled their boxes out to a rented pickup truck, I watched from a distance, unseen, leaning against a pillar across the street. Cliff tried once to walk toward me. Marina pulled him back. Then she looked up directly at me. Her eyes were full of anger. And something else. The realization that she had underestimated me completely. And then she turned away. I didn't wave. I didn't nod. I simply watched the life they tried to steal slip from their fingers. They drove away, without another word. 2 months passed. The criminal case proceeded, with quiet efficiency. Marina accepted a plea agreement. 18 months probation, restitution payments, community service. Cliff received a similar sentence. Their marriage dissolved within weeks. I did not attend the divorce hearing. Instead, I spent those weeks repairing things inside the house. Not the walls or the floors, those were untouched. What needed repair were the little things. Reorganizing my study, replacing the scratched cabinet, removing Marina's framed pictures, placing them gently in a box, storing it in the attic where memory could rest untouched. Selena visited often, always carrying a notebook or a basket of baked bread. She never asked how I felt. She always asked what I planned to do next. One evening, as we sat on my porch watching the sun set behind rolling lavender clouds, she said quietly, "You protected yourself, Jonathan. Now protect someone else." And so I did. I joined a volunteer legal program for seniors, helping them understand their rights, reviewing suspicious documents, training them to recognize signs of manipulation. Each person reminded me of someone like me, trusting, hopeful, vulnerable. And each time I guided someone through a potential deception, a small piece of my own hurt softened. One afternoon, after finishing a consultation, I returned home and paused at my doorway. The house was quiet again, not with loneliness, but with peace. Earned peace. Defended peace. I stood there a long moment, letting the silence settle around me like a warm coat. Then I whispered a single truth into the stillness. Trust is powerful, but trust without vigilance is surrender. In the end, Marina did not steal my home. She taught me painfully, brutally, that even those we love can lose their way. And when they do, the only path to peace is to stand firm, speak truth, and protect the life you built with unwavering strength.